Hello and welcome to this special interview with Avanti Nagral. We are discussing language. Avanti, you've just done this beautiful show, Carnival of Culture. And today, at a time when language across the country has become such a huge topic of discussion, people are fighting over language, people are fighting over which language gets precedence over, which language, and all of that is in the news. But you're doing something completely different. You see language as something that unites people rather than divide. So tell me a little bit about Carnival of Culture and how did this idea come about?
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you so much. And I know you came to the show, which was incredible. Thank you for being there. Carnival of Culture is a movement that we're trying to build to redefine what culture means to us, particularly for young people. So last year, I took on this project where I sang 50 songs in 50 different languages with artists from across the world. And language, like you said, is a form of people's identity. It's a form of communication, but it's also a form of apnapan, right? We feel close to somebody when they speak our mother tongue.
Yes, absolutely.
And we feel like we're seen and understood. And all my grandparents come from different parts of India. My nani is from Jammu Kashmir, my nana is from Punjab, my aji or my dadi is from Maharashtra, and my dada was from Karnataka. So I don't really have the concept of a mother tongue. And I also grew up in the US, as you can tell from my accent. So for me, language was always this beautiful khichdi blend, and something that I almost grew up really envious of when people felt so strongly about their identity. The goal with the project was, how do you use language and music specifically as a medium to learn about other languages, to preserve your own culture and identity, and to make the world feel like it's a smaller place?
I know you said that, you gave me this very beautiful description of the number of languages, your grandparents speak, both sets of grandparents speak. But tell me something, have you ever identified with one particular language as your language of comfort? If not mother tongue, then language of comfort. Like, we all have that one language.
Of course. I mean, I think in English, but I would say Hindi, even though I learned it later in life, makes me feel apna, if that makes sense, and that's only because it's the common language among, my parents both speak Hindi, that's their common language, so all of the other languages kind of funnel down to that. But
you speak Marathi also.
I can see me samjhu shakte. Like, I can understand.
Yes.
My aji is Marathi, so because of that, I get a strong influence.
Yes.
I think it's that, right? When somebody speaks to you, when somebody comes up and speaks to you in Marathi, or we recently visited, my grandfather passed away a few years ago, but we visited his village in northern Karnataka, and I learned how to speak a few words, and it makes all the difference.
All the difference.
Right? And
you're representative of Gen Z. So tell me something. What does language mean to Gen Z? Because while we have politicians discussing how language should be dealt with in this country, especially when it comes to education and schools, to Gen Z, to your generation, what does language mean to you? Because you're traveling a lot more.
Yeah.
You're living away from home a lot more.
Yeah.
You're interacting with people from different cultures a lot more than perhaps generations before you did. So what does language mean to you? Is it a form of identity for you, your generation?
I think for our generation, it's a form of preserving history and identity. And at the same time, it's also a channel of learning. One of the biggest things we saw with the project when we did it digitally, and then also with the show, was it was so amazing when, for example, if we sing in Sindhi, somebody who is Sindhi feels like they're represented and proud. I remember actually we did Punjabi. There was a young Punjabi boy who was 5 years old and speaking in Punjabi, right? And that was so amazing. Beautiful moment, yeah. So on one hand, it's about what is mine, but what I love about our generation is it's about learning about the other, and it's about that blend. For example, when we did this project digitally, my biggest happiness was seeing people use song as a medium to say, oh my God, I didn't know Maithili was like this. Oh my God, I didn't even know Kokborok existed as a language, right? And using that as a medium of discovery, I think people are more and more excited to learn different languages, both locally and globally. And I do think that there is a movement where language, rather than becoming a form of me versus you in our generation, is becoming a form of unification.
That's very good to hear. But one of the things I want to ask you, I saw this beautiful clip where you were explaining Gen Z lingo. And I learned several new words. So tell me, it's also language is becoming very different, and you tend to pick up these words. So tell me a little bit about Gen Z lingo, and before I come back and, and ask you a little bit about the songs and how you picked up the the proper accents and pronunciation, etc. Tell me a little bit about Gen Z lingo and how do these words,
originate?
Yeah, originate, or what are the most interesting Gen Z words in your opinion?
I think so. The one that I hear most often used is cap. Do you know what no cap means?
No, please explain.
So if I say, Saurabh is a great host, no cap, what do you think I'm saying?
I think you're saying I'm a great host.
You are a great host. Cap means lie. So no cap. So if I say
lie.
somebody's capping, it means they're lying. See, I am like the Dadima of Gen Z, as in I'm born in 97 and that's the first year of this generation.
Gen Z, yes.
But because I have a digital presence, I'm more used to the lingo than, say, my peers are.
Yeah, and so I think one of the words I learned from you was Caucasianship.
Caucasianship, yes.
Yeah, so these are very interesting words, and these are an interesting take to language, right?
Absolutely.
With every generation, language evolves.
Yes.
And I think, we see a lot of reels on Instagram on Gen Z lingo and how it, sort of works.
Yeah.
But tell me, when you decided to do this project in songs in so many languages, what seems daunting to me is to getting the pronunciation right for each of these languages. How did you manage that part of it?
So when I first moved to India, I was a preteen, and when we decided, my family and I, that we were living here for a longer period, I went to an ICSE school, so I had to study Hindi. And at 13, I didn't even know Ka Kha Ga, and people were studying full one-act plays and short stories.
Yes.
So for me, that, alongside the fact that I learned Hindustani classical music from Dr. Prabhatre for a few years, it was really important that I got the ucharan right? Now, if you hear how I speak in English, when I first started speaking in Hindi, I grew up bilingual, but I sounded very much like Mera Nam, right? And so...
yeah, the typical...
the typical, the NRI accent,
yes.
And upon moving here, I wanted... Part of identity is knowing what makes you stand out, but also knowing how to blend into the culture that you're in, right? So people feel like you're one of them and seeing them. And so working on ucharan was very, very important. And because I was able to do that for Hindi, to the degree that I almost sounded like a Namaskar, yahan ka vatavaran, that's how I used to speak. As a musician, I can perceive sound perhaps better than the average person. So I think I can hear pronunciation differences better than the average person. So that helped a lot. But it's really about being a keen listener and a lot of practice, right? For example, in a lot of South Indian languages, there are several types of ways to say R or N. Like in Malayalam, you say na.
Like, I heard you sing the Bengali song, the Tagore song, Ami Chini Guchini.
Yeah.
So, the pronunciation was perfect. But what kept crossing my mind is Gen Z is quite capable of learning multiple languages. There's no doubt about that. And you're an example of that. In such a situation, do you think this whole language row that we see in this country, where people are saying, oh, I can learn 2 languages, or I can learn 3, or I can learn 4, or it's impossible to learn more than that, be proficient in more than that many languages. I think as I see Gen Z, I think you guys pick up languages more easily. Is that a...
Well, we just have more tools and resources, right?
Yes.
Like, I can just ask my phone, how do I say hello in Tamil, and it'll tell me, right? Whereas previous generations didn't have that kind of access.
Yes.
So while we may not be able to achieve proficiency, I think we can achieve like a basic sense of conversational etiquette in a lot of different languages, right? Just the basics. Even in a few different languages, if you're able to say, hi, hello, how are you, where am I going, if you're able to interact with people. Again, it's about making people feel seen. And I know that makes a huge difference. Let's say, for example, if I move to Bangalore tomorrow, picking up Kannada, just the basics, would help me so much, right? If I moved to...
Vis-a-vis taking the position that I won't learn the language.
Absolutely. Now, there is a lot of folks who may or may not, right? But to your point earlier, you were talking about slang. Gen Z has their own slang. Now there's Gen Alpha who has their own slang, which skibbity toilet riz is the word that Gen Alpha uses, which is kids who are age 13 and below today, which is a whole other realm.
A whole other different new world.
But the point about each generation having slang is that feeling of belonging.
Absolutely.
The generation wants to feel a sense of belonging with each other, to almost be like, okay, our parents may not understand us, but we understand each other. And that's the point of language, right? And I think language evolves over time. What I think is sad is to see more and more mother tongues are being lost, and perhaps bringing back language in a honestly gamified way to make it fun. That's why if you see apps like Duolingo and others where it becomes a game, it becomes this challenge and reward people have to partake in. And that style, I think, for generations going ahead and making it a part of their everyday life will encourage that more and more.
Tell me, as someone who's, you said you did music, so therefore your perhaps perception of sound is better.
Yeah.
For your generation, for people like you, for your age and your friend circle, how many languages do your friends speak on an average?
I would say 2 to 3.
2 to 3.
Yeah.
All of them are pretty proficient in 2 to 3.
Pretty proficient in 2 to 3. And many of them are starting, what I'm noticing also is a trend of a lot of folks starting to learn foreign languages as well. I mean, with the surgence of, say, K-dramas and K-pop, there's a lot of kids I notice who are learning Korean. Not just, you would think, okay, Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, but I know folks who are in Bihar and tier 2, tier 3 cities who are learning these languages, right? Again, it's become more accessible and people want to learn, want to be more proficient when they travel, and just more than anything, it's a hobby. I think language learning has become a hobby for people, and I think it's an amazing hobby because it trains your brain in so many different ways. And I think that, funny enough, like I said, I've spent a lot of my life in the US. Wahan pe, if somebody speaks more than 2 languages, it's like, oh, badi baat. But yahan pe,
everybody does.
Everybody does. Like you go to most households, and in fact, you talk to older generations, and you just ask them how many languages, they'll be like, 5, 6. They already know that many languages, right?
Yes. And so no, I mean, so for example, I grew up in Darjeeling, so I speak a little bit of Nepali.
Oh, very cool.
I've lived in Maharashtra, so I speak a little bit of Marathi.
Yeah.
Hindi, of course, a little bit English, and then my mother tongue Bengali. So that's 5.
That's 5, see?
Yeah. So I'm saying, on an average, Indians are capable of learning more languages, and your generation more so because of the tools available.
Yeah.
So lastly, I want to ask you, there is a language debate in the country, right?
Yes.
And how many languages people can learn, what they cannot learn, how many they should be learning, what should be the focus. In your opinion, as representative of Gen Z, tell me, what do you think should be the number of languages that someone should learn, and how easy or difficult is it to implement it?
I think from a, honestly, just cognition perspective, I studied cognitive science at Harvard, and for me, language is a huge tool to unlock cognition. So I personally do think at the schooling level, if you are able to do 2 to 3, it just unlocks cognition in a way that really is a game changer. One of the things that sets India apart from other languages in, say, Asia, and even actually parts of Europe, is English is a huge thread and a unifier, right? And I think that's important because it is a medium of instruction globally, and it's what sets us apart. It's why we have so many CXOs globally.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
As compared to other countries who have only prioritized a specific language. I think there's a need for both, right? By default, you have most people speaking English or understanding it at the very least. I think there is a space to have specific subcultural pride, and we need that, along with knowing what are mediums of instruction across the country that will help you with mobility. So in my opinion, personally, most curriculums do have 2nd and 3rd languages, and from the perspective of making it engaging, making it fun, a tool of learning and cognition, I think it's a beautiful thing.
And lastly, I'd like to ask you, what has been the most fun part of doing this whole program in so many languages, and what were the new languages you picked up? And tell us a little bit about the most fun part of doing Carnival of Culture.
Absolutely. Firstly, it was so amazing to be able to work with artists from across India and across the world, and for people to feel like their own identities are represented. I wish I could speak 50 languages, but since I can't in this lifetime, I will settle for singing 50 or hopefully one day 100. I think some of the languages that were very fascinating were, say, Kokborok or Meitei, some more Northeast languages that we often don't hear as much about or are not as represented. Irula was a very fun one as well. Irula is from the Irula tribe between Tamil Nadu and Kerala. And I think the most fun thing was now I can pronounce 10 different types of T's, R's, N's, and the brain cognition there. What was really beautiful was being able to see how how music can be that thing that brings people together. It is a universal language. You may not understand what somebody's saying, but you feel what they're saying, right? And you can feel it. It's not just about the pronunciation of the language, but each place has a different musical style.
Absolutely.
And that was really fun to pick up. That was really interesting to learn. And for us, going forward, we had the digital series. We've had our, pilot edition of Carnival of Culture, where it was a musical concert, but also a mela, where we were representing people, redefining culture, local artisans, young entrepreneurs. The goal is, how do we take that to different stages across the country, across the world, and really show that the world is a much smaller place than we think it is, and we all deserve to have our identities represented and learn from each other. And
that's a beautiful thought to end this on, because I think one of the things that everybody is talking about is priority to language, but I think what we can do and what you've shown is that language can really, really be an unifier rather than being a dividing force. And the more languages we learn, I think, the better. So thank you so much for coming to the NDTV studio, and thank you so much for joining us. All the best with Carnival of Culture.
Thank you so much.